Hi grade 10s, it's Miss Thungarush here, and we're going to do a second video today on solving systems of equations using substitution. So don't forget, go get a piece of paper and a pencil so you can do math along with me at home. I found this math notebook hanging around my house, and so I thought I'd use it today for our lesson. And we're going to look at this page right here, and we're going to try this question where it asks you to use substitution to solve the question 4x plus y equals 6, 3x minus 2y is equal to 10. And don't forget that that means I want to find out where those two lines intersect or where they cross. So what we're going to do is just like we did last Friday, step number 1 is to take one of those two equations and make one of them either y equals or x equals. And we'll do that right now. So I have these two equations, and I need to pick which one it would be better to use if I want to make one of them y equals or x equals. Let's look at the second equation. If I move the 3x to the other side, I still have minus 2y, so that would not be y equals. And if I move the minus 2y to the other side, I still have 3x. So neither of those two variables could be easily made x equals or y equals. Let's look at the other equation though. If I were to take the 4x and move it to the other side, then I would have y is equal to 6 minus 4x. And step number 1 said make one of the equations either y equals or x equals, and we've done that. For the next part of step 1, it says that we have to take the equation that we've made y equals and put it into the other equation. So I'm going to write down the second equation, 3x minus 2y is equal to 10. And don't forget that y is the exact same thing as 6 minus 4x. So I'm going to remember that when I write this equation, the second equation. So I have 3x minus 2. This is the same, this is the same, the minus is the same, the 2 is the same, the equals will be the same, and the 10 is the same. The only thing that I'm going to do differently is instead of writing y here, I'm going to write down 6 minus 4x. So step number 1 is to isolate or get x or y by themselves in one equation, and step number 1, the next part of step number 1 says take that and put it into the other equation, and I've done that right here. Step number 2 says that we need to now solve for x. And what does that mean? It means bring all the x's together, move everything over to the other side, and finally get x all alone. So we are going to do that right now. So I have this equation. I've got x's, I've got parts with no x's. I want to simplify it and get x all alone. So here I have 3 x's. Here I have minus 2 times 6. So that means I have minus 12. Now the next part causes sometimes a bit of difficulty because you need to remember that it's minus 2 times minus 4. So if I have a negative 2 times a negative 4, it's going to be plus 8x is equal to 10. Because this negative 2 multiplies by the first part, the 6, and the second part, that is minus 4x. Okay, now we need to bring the x parts together. So if I taught you grade 9, you would have known that whenever we circle numbers, we circle the number with the sign in front. So that means I have 3 x's plus 8 x's, 3 x's plus 8x, 8, 9, 10, 11x. And then I want to take this minus 12 and get rid of it and move it to the other side. So plus 12, these cancel out. And I have 10 plus 12 gives me 22. And that means that x is equal to 22 divided by 11. So that means for my intersection point, the x should be equal to 2. What we need to do now is we need to find out what the y would be. Okay, at this point, I always like to check with Desmos to make sure I'm on the right track. So I'm going to go to Desmos, enter those two equations, and make sure the intersection point is happening at x is equal to 2. So using Desmos, I see that the x should be equal to 2 when those two lines cross. And now I just need to find out the y. And according to Desmos, it should be y equals minus 2. And we can do that by doing step 3 of substitution. So in step 3, we're going to put this x is equal to 2 into either one of the first equations. We can pick either one, and if we do that, we'll find out what the y is. I always like to pick the formula or equation that looks easier. I think, in my opinion, this one looks easier, so I'm going to use this equation. I'm going to write down 4x plus y is equal to 6. I see down here that my x should be equal to 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross off this x and make it a 2. So that means I've got the 4 and the 2 right next to each other. It means I'm multiplying. 4 times 2 is 8 plus y is equal to 6. And if I get y all alone, it's 6 minus 8. So y is equal to negative 2. So over here, my intersection point, the solution to the system of equations will be 2, negative 2, just like we saw on Desmos. Now, what could I do if I didn't have Desmos? If I didn't have a device, if it was a test and I wanted to check my answer without Desmos? Well, step number 4 is what you can do to check your answer. And we'll do that right now. So I'm going to use the second equation and check to see that if x was 2 and y was negative 2, my equation would work. So what that means is I'm going to cross off this x and I'm going to put a 2 there. I'm going to cross off this y and put a negative 2 there. And that means I have 3 times 2 gives me 6, minus 2 times negative 2 is going to be negative 4. And if I, with my calculator, did 6 subtract negative 4, that would be equal to 10. And since the equation works, these two answers are the same, then we know the substitution we just did was correct. So let's try this second example together. And when you look at this second example, you might notice that it's easier than the first one we did because both of the equations are already y equals. So they have already done one of the steps for us. So all I need to do is write down y equals negative 3x minus 7. But I know that y should be the same thing as 4x plus 14. So I'm going to cross off this y and write down 4x plus 14. 4x plus 14, we want to know when it's equal to minus 3x minus 7. So let's write that a little neater. We just put the equations right next to each other. And then we're going to do step 2, where we are going to solve for x. So solving for x means that I have to rearrange this equation. It means I need to put the x's together and I need to put the parts with no x's together. So I want this minus 3x to come and join this 4x because they are the same sort of items. So if I want to get rid of this minus 3x, I'm going to put a plus 3x here and they'll cancel out. But that means on this side, I need to have a plus 3x. Okay, so now I have 4x plus 3x gives me 7x plus 14 is equal to negative 7. Now, I've got 7x over here, but I've got this 14 with it. This 14 does not belong with the x's because there are no x's with the 14, so I want to move it to the other side. So I'm going to put minus 14 here, so these cancel out, but then I need to do minus 14 on the other side. And 7x would then be equal to negative 7 subtract 14. You might need to use your calculator for that. Negative 7 subtract 14, it's going to be equal to negative 21. And now we're going to divide by 7, and x is equal to minus 3. So that means that if I were to find the intersection point, the x of the intersection point should be minus 3, and we want to find the y. As always, I'm going to use Desmos just to check that, to make sure I am right. So Desmos shows me that I'm right. The intersection point does happen at x is equal to -3. And now we're going to use step number 3 to show that the y would be y equals to 2. And so I can pick either one of my original equations. They're both relatively easy, so I can pick either of them. Maybe I'll pick the first one just because there's no negatives in the first equation. I'm going to write down that equation. And I'm going to take what I just found out about x. I found out that x is equal to -3. And I'm going to cross off the x because I know the x has to be equal to -3. So I'm going to solve this now. 4 times -3 is -12. -12 plus 14 is equal to 2. And that 2 is going to go right over here. And I have shown that the intersection point should be -3, 2, just as Desmos let us know. But it's good to have another way to check our work because maybe next year we'll be in a class where we can't use Desmos, or maybe we won't have a device with us. So we need to learn how to use algebra to check that our answer makes sense. And that is step number 4, where we are going to pick the other equation now and try putting the x and y into that equation to make sure it works. So since I've used this equation, I'm now going to use the second equation and check to make sure that my numbers make sense with the second equation. So I know that according to what I have, the x should be equal to -3 and the y should be equal to 2. So what I want to check is I want to check that when I put those numbers into this equation, the equation makes sense. So here I go. I'm going to cross off this x. I'm going to put -3 there. Let's see, what do I get? -3 times -3 is 9. 9 minus 7 is equal to 2. And this number and this number, they're the same. Both of them tell us that y would be equal to 2. So that means that we are correct. And our substitution has been right. And we have not made any mistakes. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with one more question. I would like you to try it. I want you to check your answer with Desmos, or you can send me your work by email or by Instagram and I will check it, or you can Google Meet with me and we can talk about the problem. Okay, have a great day. Bye.